And once again, thank Dhiren Sheth and COTAAP for putting together this panel discussion and this entire 4-hour session on World Cotton Day. So, Dhiren, I will now mute my microphone, and all 4 of us on the panel should mute our microphones. And Dhiren, I'm turning it back to you. Again, thank you for your leadership.
Thank you, Terry, for a wonderful session. Like before in the first session, I've got several messages on my saying that they were finding it very enjoyable. We have actually missed out 3 questions from the audience, which we could not ask because of running out of time. A request to everybody to send in your questions a little bit early, so we have time to process them and ask the panelists. So thank you to all 5 of y'all. A wonderful session. Thank you.
Thank you.
So the next session is about to start. We have Manik Gupta, who most of you all know. He's a very, very young, let me say he was a young cotton merchant till some time back, but now has moved on to much bigger roles. He's the head of Glencore Agriculture in India. Manik, over to you.
Thanks, Renbhai. Thanks for the introduction, and a very happy World Cotton Day to everybody. We are very excited with the subject of our panel discussion today, which is the future of agribusiness 2030 and beyond, cotton and other crops. Our goal in this panel discussion is to share our point of view on the developments in the agribusiness and how we see that changing the face of agriculture over the next 10 years. The challenges in agriculture are enormous. The biggest challenge includes feeding 10 billion people in 2050, changing climates and changing social systems. It's not the first time, though, that humanity is faced with these challenges. Over the last 6 decades, the world population has grown from 3 billion to almost 8 billion today, which is a compound annual growth rate of 1.6%. But luckily, our food availability has grown from 780 million tons to 2.7 billion tons, which is a growth rate of 2.1%. So we haven't had any major supply shocks because the growth of production has exceeded the growth of population. But if you look at the area under cultivation globally has only gone up by 0.25%, which means the major improvement in food availability is because of better technology that has been deployed in the sector over the last 6 decades. Now, if we grew by the same relative rates, we should have enough food in the world till eternity. But that will be a tall order without an accelerated intervention of technology, especially in light of the sustainability and traceability needs of the world today. Digital agriculture, which is going to be one major part of our discussion today, is a very, very wide canvas. It offers new services, possibilities where farmers can access better and spontaneous advice amongst a host of other benefits. In an ideal utopian world, robotics and drones will hold a lot of promise for a better life for the farmer. They can go to live in the cities and remotely control their farms. On the other hand, the largest group of farmers are small landholders who barely make ends meet. This was talked about a couple of times in the first panel discussion, where we said that 28 million farmers world over were small farmers. They live hand to mouth and do not have access to capital. The question is, how can they become part of this promising journey? What services can we offer them to enable them to lead better lives and become equal trade partners in the food value chain? One of the main reasons why digital revolution in agriculture seems like an afterthought is because farmers and multinationals have no history of convergence. Open innovation and other drivers that have been fueling the digital revolution in other sectors are still missing in agriculture. In general, farmers do not trust large corporations enough to share their data with them. However, large agribusiness, they have the footprint and expertise to monetize new products and services. Therefore, the shift is more technological as is social. To take the discussion forward, we have 4 very eminent panelists with us today who are deeply invested in this sunrise industry, who will share their experiences and perspectives and set the crystal ball rolling. We are delighted to have with us on the panel, Mr. Jinesh Shah, Managing Partner of Omnivore Capital. Jinesh Shah is a co-founder of Omnivore Partners, a venture fund investing in early stage startups, developing technologies for food, agriculture, and rural livelihoods. Jinesh is the director for multiple Omnivore-backed startups. Omnivore funds entrepreneurs building the future of agriculture and food systems. Welcome, Jinesh, to the panel. Our second panelist is Mr. Peter Bunce. He's the head of the microbials and cotton business at Indigo Ag, a US agri-tech unicorn. Peter is a cotton and a sustainability expert with a strong reputation as an entrepreneur and a startup specialist, responsible for 5 startups on 3 different continents, where 3 of these startups surpassed $200 million. Indigo Ag's mission is harnessing nature to help farmers sustainably feed the planet. Welcome, Peter, on the panel, and thanks for participating in your early morning. Our third panelist is Mr. Anupam Kaushik, who a lot of us would already know. Anupam is the president at National Collateral Management Services Limited. Anupam has worked in the commodities domain for 2 decades out of his overall experience of more than 25 years. NCML, which is a Fairfax company, is a leading organization in India providing a bouquet of commodity-based services under a single umbrella. Welcome, Anupam, to the panel. Our fourth and last panelist is Mr. Siddharth Surana, who is the head of Farmer Services Platform, FSP, at Olam International. FSP has been conceived by Olam as a new growth engine. Its global initiative and the first such platform called AgriCentral has been launched in India. Through AgriCentral app, various decision support information and advisory is given to the farmers on weather forecasts, market prices, pest and disease management, scientific agronomy practices, and agri-news in multiple languages and supporting multiple crops. The app has over 3 million downloads across the country. Welcome, Siddharth, to the panel.
Thank you, Manik.
Before we get our panelists involved in the deliberations, I just wanted to lay down some time limits. We have a hard stop, unfortunately, at 7 p.m. Indian Standard Time. We will keep the next 40 minutes for panel discussion and the last 10 minutes for Q&A, which I request you to kindly post in the chat box. Panelists are requested to be brief so that we can cover as many topics as possible, but not too brief, considering that this will be a new subject for many in the audience. To kick off our panel discussion, I would like to ask my first question to Jinesh. Jinesh, you are involved with startups day in, day out. Startups might be fertile ground for ideas for ag tech. However, with agriculture, validation and ground truthing is extremely vital. How do you make sure that the idea is scalable and sustainable when those startups actually go to market?
Sure, Manik, thanks for inviting me on the panel, and good evening, everyone. I think the question is very much relevant, right? Every time we keep hearing about how the startups are really going to scale up, right? And to be honest, the answer is that 6 out of 10 startups don't scale, right? Four do scale, 2 would do reasonably well, and the 2 would really do well and probably create a disruption in the agri sector. Look, I think ground truthing is a hard reality, right? But what we have seen that with the cost of sensor, that is the IoT devices, going down, and people are just not relying on remote sensing or anything. I think they've been trying to use IoT devices on machines which are on the field, animals which are on the field. I mean, they're flying drones. At the same time, I think thanks to Geo and the data price crash in the country, farmers themselves are able to provide the information with their mobile phones in much simpler manner than what we had in the past. Uh, but you cannot remove out ground truthing completely no matter what happens, right? So what we have seen that companies in the Indian context, and I'll restrict my answer to the Indian context because India is a smallholder farm ecosystem. We have seen there is a lot of assisted tech enablement happening. So we have seen in most of the successful startups that you have a village level smart entrepreneur who is smart enough to understand technology and is knowing and is known to most of the villagers and the farmers over there. So he is able to convince the farmers to work with them to get the information what is relevant for getting the information and pass on to the relevant tech companies, right? I mean, while everything is not streamlined, but what we are seeing the last 6 to 12 months, things have started improving. I mean, case in example, in the post-COVID and in the COVID scenario, where everything was stopped, I think for the first time, farmers have started adopting technology. They're giving information about the fields to the tech companies and are taking a feedback from the same. So I think ground truthing cannot be removed out, but I think with the help of technology, things will get more and more easier than what we had in the past.
Okay, thank you. I'll go to Siddharth now for one of the points on digital agriculture. Now, what is the role of digital agriculture in shaping the future? What all services can be provided to farmers over digital platform, and how to address the challenges of access, literacy, and context?
Yeah, Manik, it's a big question in itself, and I think it's a composite question composed of quite a few different dimensions that we need to look at from their own perspectives. But yeah, I think digital agriculture has a big role to shape the future of agribusiness, and within that agriculture itself, as well as the entire value chain. So, I think just taking forward from what Jinesh mentioned about, this access improving among the farmers. So, not only India, but many other countries, including Southeast Asia and many of the African countries, in fact, the access to smartphones and internet, especially the mobile-based internet, is improving at a drastic pace. India is, of course, the leader with Jio coming in and, the telco race hotting up. But other countries are also not very far behind, especially the countries which are dominated by smallholder farmer systems. So then it gives a kind of a highway, a super highway for companies and startups to build their products and services to deliver to farmers. Because, all said and done, smallholder farmers' ticket size will never justify having a dedicated ground level relationship manager or even a small time executive. So how do you reach out to those farmers, with your services and whatever services you can provide? Now, to give you an example of what all services can be provided through digital platform, there are quite a few of them. Okay, and for example, weather forecast is one. So you have, based on your big data computing and modeling, you get the weather data. You can make it, contextualized to the farmer's location, to even the farm location, and give it back to the farmer. You can give them the market prices around their location. You can give them pest and disease management. It can be conventional as well as based on image analytics, which is something that we are working on. And you can give them a smart agronomy, information and advisory how to grow crops better for more yield and safer crops. And you can in fact connect farmers to farmers. So one big advantage a farmer gets when they share their own data, that they get all the other farmers' data and insights out of them. And this is a very big phenomena that is evolving. For example, if there's a pest attack in some corner of the country, all other farmers who are connected to AgriCenter, for example, our app, may get an alert, or even the farmers nearby surroundings. If there's something strange is happening, even in weather or pest and disease attack, it can help all the farmers. Now, if farmers, a lot of the times, the farmers are doing sowing, I actually call it, the problem of looking in the rear view mirror and driving forward. That they look at the last year prices or before last year, and then they get enthused about that particular crop and sow it. But there's no futuristic estimate. At the least, what we can do is that give them the real-time estimate of the sowing progress. And if the farmers know that, okay, in my area, or the crops which will reach my markets, there's already enough sowing of that particular crop, then they might go for other crops. So yeah, I think connecting farmers to farmers and doing some more professional analysis on the data of the farmers, there are many services which can be provided. Of course, there are challenges. First of all, access, which I think is coming down drastically as we speak. Every day, millions of farmers, including other rural users, are coming on worldwide on smartphones, and which is like a doorway for them to look into various services, let alone farming. But yeah, since we are talking about agriculture, in that context, they get an access. The second thing is about literacy. Okay. Obviously, it is a constraint, but fortunately, now a lot of the providers are waking up to this idea that at least English alone will not work in India. Okay, so I call it a 3V kind of a phenomena which is happening, which is voice, video, and vernacular. So in fact, people are leapfrogging now the literacy barrier as well as they watch videos, as they talk in their own voice and then get responses over voice. And a lot of the smart, in fact, there are a lot of startups which are helping companies like us to build that voice assistance into their platforms. Okay. Then the third is vernacular. Now you'll find a lot of content on video, on text, in all the Indian languages, for example, and I'm sure that it would be happening in all other international languages. So I think these are the tools through which we are, we are hoping to, and in fact, in real time, it's working, that the barriers are coming down. The other issue is of contextualization. So of course, with the digital mass kind of a tool, the scope for contextualization gets limited up to a point. But there are smart tools and techniques through which you find out that, okay, for example, from farmers' location, you can contextualize the weather. From the markets, around the farmers' location, you can contextualize the market. So there are ways to, as much as possible, personalize the information and put it into the context of the farmers. Thanks, Manik. Yeah.
If I can just ask a follow-up question, Siddharth, these insights that you are generating because of remote sensing that you may be using and other kind of other programs, how much of this is actionable insight for the farmer? Is it just good to have information, or is it information that I can do something with and improve my bottom line?
Yeah, interesting question, Manik. So I think for one farmer, if it's good to have, it can be essential information for the other farmer. As a practitioner, what we try to do is to have information, especially when we're collecting the information from farmers. Okay, we need to have a very strong use case. So we are not just collecting blindly any information, just hoping that in future we might do something with the information or even monetize the information. So each of the information, and that's another barrier which sometimes. So I think in the beginning, which you mentioned, you made a statement that typically farmers are not comfortable sharing their data with the large companies or MNCs. I think in India, it's not even a question. I mean, farmers are, as of now, at large, almost unopinionated. They don't really have an opinion because they are not really that much aware. It might be happening in developed economies or large farming ecosystems, but here the farmers are largely not that much sensitive about it. But that does not absolve us, the providers, from the responsibility to protect the farmers' data, as well as to make sure that the data is collected for a specific use case and farmer knows. So what we try to do is that at each of the checkpoints, for example, we want to give the farmers the market prices closer to their location. At that point of time only, we'll ask that, okay, if you allow us to access your location, you can see market prices closer to your location. Otherwise, you'll get a whole laundry list of prices and you'll have to sift through that. If you give us access to your location, you can get weather at your farm. Okay, if you give us access to your picture library, you can upload your crops damage photo, and we will give you a solution what pest and disease it might be. So I think there's a need to unbundle the data requirement and also be as transparent as possible while dealing with the farmers' data, because if not today, tomorrow it can come back to haunt you. I think in India there's still a lot of scope for regulatory improvement in the whole ecosystem, which is evolving at a fast pace. So we are yet to have our own GDPR equivalent guidelines. But I'm sure it will evolve. Until the time, I think responsibility is on us market players to keep doing the good work.
Excellent, Siddharth. I think relationship building with the farmers, and this is one of the areas where there's just been information collection, gathering. You do a stock survey, you ask the farmer, how much stocks are you holding, and generally they are very skeptic because they don't know what you are going to do with the information. And generally, this is what we've seen on the trade side, that when you ask them about their crop, they'd say it's a complete disaster because they want the prices to be higher. So directionally, if they report a lower crop, that kind of mentally gives them additional level of comfort. But I understand that relationship building with the farmers obviously improves the quality of your data substantially. So I will now move to Anupam. One of the big themes in agriculture is, and also part of my opening comments, that we will need to feed 10 billion people by 2050, and the world doesn't stop at 2050, which means if you extrapolate those numbers to 2100, the need requirements of the world is going to be huge. Do you think that greater demand for food, both in terms of quantity and quality, will result in a shift of power in favor of the farmers?
Thank you, Manik. The debate is going on a very interesting note. I will share one perspective, which is the constant theme in my head, is that when you talk about the future of agribusiness or cotton and other crops 2030, I look at it only through three lenses, and all three lenses are equally important without any prioritization, which is equitability, inclusion, and sustainability. There are only three things. And the EgTech is only going to be looked at if in one way or the other, it is meeting one of these three objectives. If you look at the question that you asked, that 10 billion people in 2050, the world has done, as you have mentioned in your opening statement, that we have outsmarted the demand by almost 0.5% on a CAGR basis, 1.6, 2.1. And India has also done it. I mean, it's not that India has not done it. But what has happened that due to a number of policies in OECD countries and many countries where the farmers are, I would say, collected in a commercial sense as compared to the developing countries where farmers are small and marginal. If you look at the fiscal support or the total budgetary support to the gross farm output, in India and many other developing countries, it is negative. Actually, if you look at the last 20-year numbers, the Indian economy has extracted anywhere between 10% to 20% from the gross farm produce. The cost that it has, what it has incurred, the consumption chain has actually extracted something out of it. Whereas if you look at OECD countries, the gross support to the total production is ranging from 12% to as high as 27% in some countries. So this entire, I would say, lopsided or not inequitable treatment between the big countries and the rich countries and developing countries, it has created a very significant imbalance in the gross capital formation in these two haves and have-nots. If you look at the countries like India, the gross capital formation has been an anemic 2 to 2.5% at the constant market prices, or at the market prices, it has been around 6 to 7%. But if you look at the countries like US or Brazil or Australia, the gross capital formation has been pretty significant, which has resulted in them into taking the lead on the productivity side, the market share in the trade, and all those things. So then we move to the second aspect. If the equitability is to be addressed using EgTech, the second concept will come. It's inclusive. The entire farming community has to be looked at, and the forum over here is representing, I would say, that the whole pan globe in some sense. So the inclusion is also necessary to address, and that can certainly be supported by investment in technology in the countries where they have not invested in a big gross capital formation like large farms or mechanization and all those things. So that gap in the gross capital formation can be, I would say, short-circuited or can be covered much faster using technology. That technology will work at all aspects. It will work at the planning stage, the demand and supply planning, policy prescription of how much is to be grown, the input selection, the access to the top technology for yield enhancement. And then the third and the most important, which the whole world is grappling in all components of the economy, which is sustainability. Now, we all know that the food is one of the biggest contributor to the carbon emissions, whether it is meat or it is dairy or it is paddy or whatever you call it. I mean, if you look at the total contribution to the carbon emissions, agriculture and food will contribute to the largest, much larger than even your locomotion, your transportation and other things. So we need to be mindful that the world using technology at all aspects can actually produce whatever you want in a much lesser carbon intense way, in a much smaller landmass, and the food will be available, which will have all three aspects taken care of, which is the equitable, inclusive, as well as sustainable. Now, how do you do it using technology? I mean, there are so many technologies are there in Canada. Look at the Canada or Australia. The sustainability is already a known fact there, and why it cannot be made available to the countries who are grappling with the sustainability of water or the NPK or the seed productivity. All the things are already known in some of the top end producers of various agricultural commodities. So exchange of knowledge and spread of that using all these initiatives that a lot of people like Janesh and Siddharth and all these guys are doing, the exchange of the best practices from one best-in-class production system and transferring it to the other. Obviously, it will require some policy enablement, and the AgTech will certainly, because these three objectives can only be delivered using one technology or the other. So I would say we don't need to rediscover anything. The wheel has already been discovered in some geography or the other. We just need to request them to share it with us. So whether it is India or Pakistan or it is Bangladesh or it is Africa, I would say that the world at large can do with much smaller landmass to produce food for as many people as you want. I'll give you a small example. China, we have seen that it is an epitome of growth of last 2 to 3 decades. And despite having achieved that miraculous growth, they still import close to 130, 140 million tons of food grains to feed their population. Why can't the same food be made available in the neighborhood? India, Pakistan, easily it can be produced here if the best practices in production can be applied using all these AgTech things that we are talking about, productivity and other things. So my sense is that whatever AgTech we are looking at it, if we put it to the test of these three objectives, the future of agribusiness, I would say, will deliver for sure on sustainability and on inclusion. Equitability, I think, can still be a continuous process. But the future, I would say that companies like Olam and many such companies who are now becoming the exchange platform of the best-in-class practices from one geography to other, and these kind of companies will become the distributor of the AgTech, which has already been discovered somewhere in the geography. So my sense is that 10 billion people or more, full nutrition, good trait values, carbon inclusive, carbon sequestered, whatever you call it, the AgTech is going to deliver on all three objectives.
Thanks, Anupam. So what you're saying is technology is not a bottleneck. It's basically sharing of that technology with the right countries, with the right people, with the right ecosystems that will deliver the result, rather than so there's no open source. So we need to have an open source sort of exchange of information that's going to kind of advance the know-how of most countries, rather than every country trying to reinvent the wheel.
True. That's
so
right.
That takes me to a very logical segue to Peter Bunce. And I think Indigo Ag is doing a lot of work in that area. You talked about sustainability, you talked about carbon sequestering. Peter, in the Indian context, and Janesh talked about it, a lot of the investment in AgTech goes into supply chain functions, because generally, we've had very inefficient supply chain in India. Market linkage, Siddharth talked about, farmers getting the prices closer to harvest, and knowing what the right price is. Information dissemination, crop husbandry, and focus on basically not getting cheated by someone in the value chain are basically important goals for a developing country farmer. Many of these things are given in most developed countries. Can you shed some light on what are the AgTech focus areas in countries like US, Brazil, Australia, all of them large cotton producing countries, or focus areas for indigo ag?
Yeah, sure, Manik. It's always hard to follow Anupam. He's always got a strong opinion on things, but I'll do my best. We work a lot on, particularly we like to think of ourselves as an ag tech company working towards improving farm profitability and sustainability. So a lot of what Anupam just said on a different kind of scale. And so there's 4 kind of areas where I see, things are really interesting. The obvious one that I'm not going to spend too much time on is data and automation. That's pretty well known by pretty much everyone in this panel. We believe in it. We have a huge drone fleet. We fly all sorts of NDVI imagery, different applications of that drone fleet over fields. And we also, we acquired a satellite imagery company in 2018, which sort of, has really in-depth data analytics going back 12 years. So we can tell what farming practices someone did 12 years ago, kind of thing. It's some pretty amazing technology out there. And I guess to the question you asked Siddharth earlier, how do you actually put that data into practice? Some of the tools we're able to use are what we call internally Mufasa, which is multifactorial spatial analysis, is basically taking all this data and being able to look at all the different, overlay it with climate and look at the different soil types, the slope of the soil, the CEC, the organic matter, TRI, and being able to then really place different products more precise, prescriptive in the field to get the best results out of inputs. And in many cases, cut inputs in certain areas, which obviously helps with nitrogen runoff and fertilizer runoff and insecticide use. So there are some really cool ways these technologies and this data is being used. But there's still a lot of problems with it as well. You've got John Deere Ag and different climate corp, and everyone's collecting data in different ways, and it's kind of hard to get that all in one usable format that you can apply across fields. So we're not. Developing countries certainly aren't there yet, but they're coming a long way. Farmers are certainly less uncertain of sharing their data. One of the most interesting areas that's really new, and a lot of people may not even know about it yet, is regenerative farming and the ability to earn carbon credits on your farm. And so this has been a huge focus of us for the last sort of 18 months. And it's not just us, it's a growing movement everywhere in the world. So for those of you who don't know what regenerative farming is, it's basically, 5 practices. It's not like organic, you have to do all 5. You can do 1, 2, 3. You can step into regenerative farming, but it's basically farming practices that are good for your soil and good for your farm anyway. So planting a cover crop in between your cotton, like we recommend, typically most people would do like a 9 to 11 species cover crop, including a rye or some impact radishes to get good aeration and organic matter into your soil. No-till, if you're tilling your country, you disrupt the organisms in your soil and let a lot of the carbon back out in the atmosphere. Reduced inputs, so when your soil health improves because you've got more organic matter, you don't need to put as much, nitrogen, phosphorus into your soil. Potassium into your soil, and also crop rotation, because that helps with again, like the biodiversity on your farm, but also particularly in your soil, where those living organisms have a big impact on the crop and the health of your crop and the health of your soil, and surprisingly incorporating livestock. So the cattle industry, for example, has had a bad reputation for methane gas, and that's true. But there's a lot of evidence showing that incorporating livestock onto your farm, so eating down your cover crops, etc., it gives you another source of income, but it also helps with the actual breakdown of carbon into your soil. And so the way the connection between these good farming practices and earning a carbon credit, which I like to think of like a double crop. So you can earn money from your cash crop, be it cotton or corn or other stuff, but we're focused on cotton today. But then at the same time, you can earn carbon credits. And so the way that works is, we all know that, we probably all remember from year 6 science that photosynthesis turns carbon dioxide, converts it into oxygen, and also converts it into carbon in the form of plants and sugars, etc. And a lot of that will end up going down into the roots of plants, and will actually in fact break down and stay in the soil. That's your organic matter, which is carbon enriched. And so, this is not new that we know that. So it's been, but where we haven't been able to issue carbon credits is because it's been very expensive. And so it'll normally cost you about $5 to $6 an acre to actually do soil sampling. And a typical carbon credit from forestry costs you about $3 to $4 an acre. So, we embarked on a big mission with Verra, which is Verified Carbon Standards, and also the Climate Action Reserve. These are 2 very big, very well reputed carbon registries, and they're sort of panels of NGOs. And we showed them by using big data that you don't have to test every acre every year. If you test, what you can do is you test a portion around 13%, and it varies. And then the rest you can use models, so that there's different models out there to measure carbon content based on the amount of practices you do on your farm and the conditions in your farm. And so you can calculate the amount of carbon sequestered, and then once every 5 years, you have to then test those acres to then true it up. And so in the meantime, we keep a reserve, or the registries keep a reserve. But then these carbon credits can then earn over the years, and then can be paid out. Starting on the first year, they pay out over 10 years. And so we've seen, in the first year of doing this, you might earn half a carbon credit, but we've been able to sell these carbon credits for $20. We've sold out of the first year. Some really big brands are buying it, from tech companies to clothing companies, to energy companies who want to reduce their carbon footprint, and do it in a way that's not only just capping carbon, but it's actually taking carbon out of the atmosphere and enriching our soils and reversing it. So it's really promising. The Climate Action Reserve last week came out after a year's work with them, and they endorsed the soil carbon protocol. So they've now endorsed this cheaper way of doing it. And the good news is that in today's world, people are willing to pay a premium. So we can test it. We can test the soil for now cheaper, and we can sell the carbon credits for more. And so that's more income going into the farmers' pockets. This is super new, the fact that we can actually get a scalable way to do this. And satellite imagery comes into it because we can confirm over the, from the satellite what crops were planted, what cover crops, etc. There is some ground truthing that we have to do. That's always going to be there. I think we'll do less and less over time. And the other thing is being able to give farmers apps. So we actually give them access to our satellite imagery through apps, so they can map their fields, they can record their inputs, etc., making it again like less human touch, more scalable. So that's a really exciting sort of future of agriculture. I see that it's going to help farmers increase their profitability from these good farming practices, from reducing inputs, from the benefits of that, but also the carbon credits, at the same time helping to draw down carbon dioxide. So that's something that to me is the biggest exciting thing that sort of motivates me at Indigo and keeps us going. I'll touch on 2 others briefly though. One is on microbials and biologicals, and the other one on traceability and the supply chain. So microbials, it's been around for a while, but the new technology out there, it was normally just rhizobia, which is a nitrogen fixing bacteria. Now there's all sorts of new microbial products coming through that are natural. Most of them are seed coated, so you coat your cotton seeds when they plant. The microbes absorb in through the roots, and these naturally occurring microbes help plants through different stresses. So we've got products, and other people have got products around helping with reduced water, heat stress, cold stress, And the latest one, is about nitrogen use. So you can cut your nitrogen by 10 to 20% with some products and maintain yields. And so for example, in corn in the US and cotton, that's probably saving you about $15 an acre for a $5 micro. Plus you're more sustainable because you're not having extra nitrogen, which is a huge issue for runoff into water. There's also biotic ones coming through which can replace some modern chemistries around seedling diseases and nematode resistance. So it's a pretty exciting. The industry is not new, but it's really evolving fast. And the last one is traceability. So, it's been very difficult, as we all know, we're all cotton people here, to trace cotton through the supply chain. Now with these technologies such as Orotane and others that are out there, you can actually test any point along, and you can, based on the trace elements and isotopes, you can know where that cotton came from, and if it was blended. So suddenly it's scalable, and we're actually working with some brands now with projects where we're supplying them cotton from regen farms. They're buying the carbon credits, they're buying the cotton, we're tracing it through the supply chain, and they're willing to pay a premium. So we're passing back a premium to the farmer for a carbon credit. We're also passing a premium back to the farmer for the actual traceability part. So that's the three most things that I get excited about.
That's a lot of information, Peter, but I will still ask you one more question before I move to Siddharth. Is it only the US where you are seeing a lot of interest in this technology or this sort of ecosystem, or are there other countries that are doing similar stuff?
So Australia is big on it. It's being driven there by the government, whereas in the US it's been driven by private industry. I think there will be interest in other markets, and we plan to expand into Brazil and Europe, and one day India. Anupam, to your challenge, it's not that we don't want to go to India, it's just that the challenges of smallholder farmers is real, and we've got to figure that out before we can. It's hard enough in the US in our first year. We've got to figure out in the easy place, but then we'll eventually get to India. That's our hope. Okay,
great. So we just have about 10 more minutes for this kind of panel interaction, and then we'll have to move to questions and answers. So I'll request all panelists to be very brief in the next few questions. Siddharth, a lot of your business depends on kind of information, data gathering from the farmer and the relationship with the farm. And we already talked about some actionable kind of insights that the farmer gets out of it. Eventually, I think the farmer is the owner of his data. Of course, we know, India is still a little while away from GDPR sort of norms. But in the long run, is it possible that service providers like yourselves, will need to buy data off the farmers?
Yes, it's quite possible, as long as eventually the farmer benefits out of that. So I think as of now, and just taking forward from what I said a little while back, that even if you are paying the farmers for collecting the data, or even if you are paying the enumerators on the ground, eventually how will you get the correct data? So there need to be a strong use case which incentivizes the farmer, and not only monetary incentivization in terms of hard cash or something dole out, but if it improves their farming or their selling choices or their input choices, even by a little bit, I think farmers will be more than happy to part away with their data. So I think there needs to be some deep thinking and innovation regarding how do we ask the farmer the same question. If you just go and ask that, okay, what are you going to plant in the next crop? They might not say what you want to hear, okay, or at what price did you sell last year? But if you link it to something that you can give back to the farmers, and I mean, I think that's where one needs to really work hard at this problem. The second is that obviously I completely agree with you, Manek, that ultimately farmer is the owner of the data. But at the same time, when we talk about data-driven agriculture, it cannot happen without commingling and aggregation of data. So I think we need to delineate between the ownership and aggregation and anonymization of the data. For example, a farmer's data, his own personal or demographic data, is different from his farm level data and some other data that a company might have use of. And even then, if you can just strip it off the personal identifiers, which can lead back to the farmer who has given the data, I think even then the data has a lot of value, and you can give back the same data in a form which helps the farmer to make his own decisions before you even think about using it for an input company or equipment manufacturer. Because ultimately, if there is no direct benefit to the farmers from the data, it won't be sustainable. A very strong buy-in needs to be there from the farmer. At the same time, just to complete what I think about this matter is that at any point of time, farmers should have an option to give you a data consent part basis. I will just give my data only for this service. I won't give for all other things which I may not want from you. Okay. And even for that, farmers should have always an option to pull out of the program. And with that, all the data that a company holds needs to get erased. So we are quite clear on that. And I hope, most other providers in the segment are aware of this situation.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thanks. My next question is, Jinesh, for you. You are, your venture capital fund investing in startups regularly. You have a big portfolio at Omnivore Capital. When do you think India will have an agtech unicorn? And what sort of an ecosystem is a prerequisite for it?
Look, I think to be fair to the agtech ecosystem, I mean, the ecosystem is maybe like 4 or 5 years old. I mean, we've been running for the last 8-9 years, but the real interest has started coming in last 2-3 years, right? Indian VCs took like nearly 15 years to get the first unicorn. I don't think Indian agtech VCs will wait for that long. We have seen few of our companies crossing $100 million valuations already right now. And this is early days, right? I mean, agri-tech investments have really picked up the momentum the last 12 months. We got more investors in India focusing on agtech than we ever had it. Just to give numbers, I mean, in last year we used to have $100 million of investment as an ecosystem. This year we probably would do like $450 million kind of ecosystem investment in agri-tech. My sense is in the next 3 to 4 years, you'll see companies touching out unicorn valuations in Indian context in agri-tech, right? We have a few of our portfolio companies like Arya, Dehat. They're already doing like $80-90 million of revenues on their own. And it's just a matter of time. I think we'll start doing IPOs, or you'll have large investors coming into it and getting a unicorn valuation. I think in terms of ecosystem, I think everything seems to be falling right. For the first time, government supporting the ecosystem, right? I mean, government's not trying to fight the ecosystem, not trying to kill the capital. So I think large enterprises in the Indian context have started realizing that, guys, they have to start working with agri startups, or they would just become like a Kodak moment, right? They will just get lost in next 20 years if they don't change out. And we have seen people like UPL, Mahindra, Tata taking those bets in the Indian agri-tech ecosystem. And that's very encouraging. Also, I think they don't have an option to look to a US startup or to Israeli startup and try to superimpose the technology solution in the Indian context. They will have to figure out to work with a Bangalore startup or a Delhi startup or a Mumbai startup. And that seems to be happening out. I think, Manik, to be honest, in the next 5 years, we'll see unicorn happening in the agri-tech ecosystem. And hopefully we'll see large Indian agri enterprises working with them very soon, because we have seen more and more European companies are working with Indian agri startups than the Indian enterprises. That's what I would like to submit, right? Hopefully the Indian enterprises realizes that if they don't act now, maybe they will lose that game. I mean.
Okay, that's quite promising. When you say we'll have a agri-tech unicorn in the next few years, my last question before we move to Q&A is both for Jinesh and Anupam. The recent farm bills, the very controversial farm bills that came out, do you think, if these are implemented in the right way, is that going to be very positive for agtech? And Anupam, aside from agtech, I know it's a long subject in itself. Do you think that these can be transformational, not just in the agtech space, but in general, or is it doing too little too late from a 2030 perspective?
Manik, I'll give answer to your question in two components. One is not so optimistic, and second is component is optimistic. So then the not so optimistic component is based based on the reality of the three bills. The first bill is the APMC not being required for selling the commodity by farmer. And if you look at 2018-19 mandi fee collections, which is what the government says that you don't have to pay mandi fee when you are selling the crop. If you look at the financial numbers in 28 states and 5 union territories, so 33 geographical territories, I have the number, 11,731 crore was the collection of mandi fee, out of which 5,250 crores came from the state agencies, FCI, CCI, and NAFED. And that too was appropriated by 2 states, Haryana and Punjab. Now, what then it leaves is only around 6,000 crore rupees of mandi fee, which government says that you don't have to pay. My second part of my answer is again steeped in reality. The horticulture was always free for last 1 decade. Horticulture was always outside the APMC regime. Most of the states have cleared that horticulture is not required to be routed through any APMC structure. Nothing much happened in terms of the investment in supply chain, or nothing much happened in the private participation in building high productivity value chains. So my sense is that there is too much of romantic optimism for the short term. But on the second component of this reform, which is the 5-year contracts on the contract farming kind of a thing and facilitation and a model, I would say that would create oases of productivity, or the nuclei of the productivity across the country. So the good practices will reach farm areas, villages, and corporates will bring best-in-class practices. And whatever they do there by increasing productivity, I'll just give you a very simple number, and you will realize that your question was on unicorn. I mean, India already has had its share of unicorns. I would call Amul a unicorn, because unicorn need not come only from an AgTech, what we call appropriating a particular service or delivery of a value. The biggest unicorn that in India that can come up is the productivity side. If India increases its productivity from the current levels to the global averages, we can increase our production from 1,000 million tons, I mean a billion tons, 695 million tons of non-horticulture, 320 million of horticulture. This can easily shift to around 16 to 1,700 million tons of the produce. So that I would call a unicorn of 600, 700 million ton equivalent, and that would be shared by 14.5 crores of farmers, which are unique farmer, IDs in the country. So that I would call a genuine unicorn, because it is not appropriated by a few individuals or corporations, but it is distributed across the far and wide of the nation. The third bill, which is, I would say, it's only a kind of I would say a positive flag, that you don't have to worry about investing in the agriculture system. So if you're investing and holding commodities, don't worry, we will not touch you using essential commodities. So I would say that the only meaningful bill in this troika is the contract farming, because it will help people in reaching out and creating model productivity farms, which will be replicated, people will imitate it, copy it, and there would be a productivity revolution in the country. So that's what, but it will happen over a bit of time. Nothing immediate is, to me, nothing immediate is visible. But 2, 3, 4 years, you will see a lot of stories where productivity miracles. I mean, we have seen in UP, the sugar productivity has gone up almost by 30% because one seed was introduced, and it changed the entire dynamics of sugar industry of UP. So what I'm saying that if somebody does on the production side, you can have a pan-India unicorns.
Yeah, thanks, Anupam, for a statistic-laden answer that you're always known for. But I think we have two questions. One for Siddharth and one for Peter. Vinod has a question for Siddharth. Vinod, Dhiren, can you unmute Vinod and let him ask that question to Siddharth?
Yeah, just doing it, Manik.
Yeah.
Yeah, Vinod, you are unmuted. You can ask the question now. Vinod?
If Vinod is not unmuted, can we? I think Terry is.
The problem with his muting. Yeah, Vinod.
Can you hear me now? Yeah, sorry.
Okay, yeah, we can hear you, Vinod.
Sorry, please quickly. So part of this question has been already answered when Manik asked Siddharth on the data protection and other things. Number one, what I say is, you've been talking about weather forecast and price information. So earlier, as far as we can remember, in India, the AIR used to give the information, or the Doordarshan later on. So now it has become more personalized. So this information is still available to the farmer in some way or the other, say print media, or always through Doordarshan. But there's some data which the farmer shares with the data provider. And suppose it falls in hands of marketeers like a pesticide company or a microfinance company, and a scrupulous guys, there could be a reverse marketing. You could end up, they will be selling some spurious products, and it becomes too late, before something happens. Probably you will have a microfinance guy, giving out loans at a different. So you're trying to create a different set of middlemen who could exploit the small farmers. So how do you protect farmers in this way, from this?
Thanks, Vinod. This is a very important question, and thanks for asking this. So, data security is paramount, obviously. So, and there's a difference between farmer sharing their own data or interest in a particular company's product or services knowingly, and be it being leaked, or through your own laxity in your systems or policies, just getting into wrong hands. So the second part is obviously there should not be any tolerance for that. But at the same time, there are startups and companies who would like to monetize this data. And monetization in itself is not a bad thing if it benefits the farmer at the end of the day. So farmer is also a smart operator. They will make their choices looking at their own constraints and alternatives in front of them. But how it can work is that, for example, you show a farmer a particular pest diagnosis in their field. Now, if that these are the companies which are known for their own products, which can help the farmer with tackling that particular problem, a farmer can just go to those companies listed in a particular app, which is working like a platform connecting farmers with the companies. And instead of buying from the local retailer where he is not sure what the retailer is going to give him, he can buy directly. So I don't necessarily call that as a bad thing, but obviously farmer needs to be knowing that where the data is going, and how, and it could be also a lead generation kind of a program wherein companies ask for farmers data, and farmers on platform provide their own data. So ultimately, if it's an active participation by the farmer, by their own consent, we are all for that, but not the other part, which is like letting the data get leaked, or even without the consent of the farmer getting it to be monetized. So I hope you answered your question.
Thanks, Siddharth. I think we have one final question. We have 3 minutes before we close the panel discussion. Terry, if you can shoot your question to Peter.
Yes, I thank you. And thank you to all the panel members. Peter, I'll direct this to you, but other panel members may want to comment also. The Better Cotton Initiative, or BCI, is supposed to be doing many of the same functions you're talking about, collecting data, using that data to optimize input use and help farmers improve over time, get better, in other words. And BCI accounts for about, or they claim to account for about 650,000 tons, or a little over 10% of Indian cotton production. Peter, are you aware of BCI? Have you interacted with them? Are any of their activities dovetailing with yours? And is it a cooperative relationship, or are you not even aware of them?
Yeah, no, we're very aware of them, and we obviously applaud what they're trying to do, like around improving sustainability and profitability for farmers. So like we're very aligned on what we're trying to do. I think BCI does a great job in India, and where they benefit some of the smallholder farmers, they can really apply some of the results they're able to achieve are really good. They're prevalent, that they exist in the US as well, as you probably know. That they're less effective in the US. They sort of try to treat all farmers equally, and that kind of doesn't work as well in India. Like some of the data requirements is a little bit clunky. And so, we work with them, and we're an implementing partner. So we help them. We actually help our farmers through their program. And so we've talked about sharing data, etc. So we're very supportive of them, for sure. But we think we're probably taking a little step further.
Thank you.
Okay, I think we are 1 minute away from closing the panel discussion. In conclusion, I think, thank you all the panelists and the audience for being part of this discussion for about an hour. We would have gone on for another 1 hour had it not be another follow-up session 4. I think I will save my concluding remarks because we are out of time. Dhiren, over to you. Once again, thanks Anupam, thanks Janesh, thanks Peter, and thanks Siddharth for your comments and for sparing the time for the panel discussion. Over to Dhiren.
Thank you.
Thank you to everyone because this panel discussion was very different from the normal one, and I mean, it was very interesting. It was not the regular cotton discussions that we have. So we have to start with the new panel. And the next panel is going to be focusing on PIMA and Egyptian and extra fine products. We have